Welcome to Ring the Down Bell. I am Kevin, and with me is Mr. Herb Simmons, Mayor Herb Simmons, I should say, who has 50 plus years in this industry. How are you?
Fine, Kev. Thanks for having me on, and I like the name of the podcast, "Ring the Dang Bell," because that's all about what I love hearing is ringing the bell at a wrestling match.
Absolutely. So, as I said, you've been in the business for 50 plus years. Tell me a little bit about your childhood and what led you in that direction of professional wrestling.
Well, I just celebrated my 52nd year last month. Um, my childhood was one like all of us that's doing this now. The people who are out there watching it, I grew up as a fan. I grew up in East St. Louis, Illinois, in the housing projects, about 3 blocks away from where a place called Social Center, and that's where they used to have wrestling every week. And people like Luthez wrestled there, Pat O'Connor, Cowboy Bob Ellis, all the greats that my grandparent and my mother used to go and watch. And when I got older, they would drag me and my siblings along, especially my brothers. But it was, and then as I got older, there at the social center, it was a kind of like it was a community center, a place you could go to after school, shoot basketball, but then they'd have these great wrestling events, wrestling cards back then, as they called them. And, you'd go down and help set up the chairs for it. And, so, I grew up as a fan, just like everybody that's out there watching it these days are working in the business. They were a fan.
So, most people that I've interviewed that were fans who want to get in the business, they became professional wrestlers. You went to the promoter side of it. Why, why a promoter instead of being in the ring as a wrestler?
Well, because I probably wasn't tough enough to take the bumps. I've been asked that question by some of the greats. Sam Muchnick, the late president of the NWA for 41 years. When I first met him, he said, we were at eating dinner and Larry Matisek set up the meeting. Larry Matisek was his protege. He went to work for Sam when he was 16 years old and got his first paycheck from Sam, $25. And I've still got a copy of that check. And Sam said, "Hey, Larry tells me you want to get into business." And right away I said, "Yeah, but not taking the bumps." I mean, I'm recovering from a bump I took just about 2 weeks ago. And, but no, I always, the behind the curtain aspect of it is what really was fascinating to me when I got to meet the guys that Larry Matisek introduced me to, and then Sam Muchnick. And the more I learned about the business at a young age, the more I thought, man, this is really neat. While my friends growing up were out doing their baseball thing, and I played a little Corey League, a little church ball. But man, when Wednesday night, when wrestling at the Chase from in St. Louis came on, I was in front of the television with my mom, and she liked all the good guys, and I liked all the bad guys, and I just thought that being able to put the matches together and tell the stories is what I really liked, and that's what I like doing nowadays.
So, I imagine at some point you with your mom and dad and said, Mom, Dad, this is what I want to do for a living. What was their reaction to that?
Well, I was fortunate that I grew up in a single parent home,
Okay.
so my mom was the only one I had to convince, and it was kind of easy because she was such a big fan herself. Like I said, she didn't miss a card, and she liked the Cowboy Bob Ellis's and the Johnny Valentines and people like that, where I liked the Baron von Raschke's or the Fritz von Erichs and the Gene Kaniskis. So we would sit there and dicker back and forth on who was going to win. And so it was, she was an easy person to convince that her son was going to somehow someday be a part of the wrestling business. I don't think she realized until later on in life that I was going to be in it this long. Of course, she's been gone for several years now, but she always told me how proud she was that I got to follow that dream, and I caught it. And that's what I tell so many of the young boys out there and the ladies now. It's okay to follow that dream, and hopefully you follow it. Hopefully you catch it. Some of us have. Some of us did, and some of us didn't take advantage of it. And so for 52 years, I've enjoyed every year of it. Do I get frustrated at times? Sure. But man, I wouldn't have changed it for the world because I've met so many great people.
So take me through this. You decide that you wanted to get into this side of the business. When did you decide, okay, well, let me actually back up. What was your first experience with the business? Was it when you got your first promotion, or were you working backstage with people?
No, I was actually, back in the early 70s, I was hanging out with Larry Matisek, a dear friend of mine. He lived in Belleville, Illinois. Like I said, I grew up in East St. Louis, and then later on moved to the Washington Park, Illinois area, which was a suburb of East St. Louis. And then from there moved to East Carondelet, where I live currently. But Larry was a special individual in the business. I mean, up until the day he left this great earth, wrestling was his life. He loved every other sport out there, and he watched all the other sports, but he lived and breathed wrestling, and he could tell you anything you wanted to know about it. So I had been hanging around with him, going to the office with him when he was working at Sam's. Started off just sweeping up and emptying the trash, and so his father, Larry, or I, either one, had driver's license at that time. His father, Edwin, would drive us to the hotel over in St. Louis. They had several different locations over a period of time. That Sam would get aggravated with them raising the price of the rent at one place, so he'd go find another one, and he'd move the office there. And so we would go there, and man, the more I got to read through the files, because Sam kept a lot of files, which I have to this day. After Larry passed away, they were left to me, and I was, and Sam always told us, you can look through all the files you want here. Nothing leaves the office. Anything you hear in this office better stay in this office. And so the more we would sit there and go through the files and read about the matches, how they were put together, and, 6 months or a year pre-planning. I thought, man, how does this work? This is magic. How do you look into the future and know what's going to happen? And of course, Larry caught on a lot quicker than I did. And of course, he was kind of my mentor. Sam was teaching him, and then Larry was teaching me. So it was, and then my first match was in 73. Which at that time I had met quite a few guys in the business that I had the foot in the door because, hey, I knew Sam Muchnick. I mean, right. He was like the god to me. I mean, he was, the night I went out to eat dinner with him, like I said, I was scared. I was like a kid at a candy shop.
So, Mr. Herb, let me stop you for a second, because I'm sure that we may have a lot of people that the younger generation who may not know who Sam Muchnick was. Briefly, you can tell everyone who Sam Muchnick was and why he's so important?
Yeah, Sam Muchnick was the promoter out of St. Louis. back in the days, even before I was around. Him and Tom Pax was another promoter that had a feud, because wrestling back in the day was a tough business. It was territorial, and it was, you don't cross my line, I won't cross your line, meaning you don't come into my area and I'm not going into yours. And at one time there was all these promotions throughout the country, and each person or persons had their territory. And Sam was St. Louis. That was his baby. He didn't have anything else other than that. He became the National Wrestling Alliance, what they called the NWA. He was the president of that for 41 years at the different times. And so he controlled the championship. He basically said who was going to be defending it, who was going to be the champion. And when other promoters, whether it be the Fritz von Erich or the Crockett's out of the Carolinas, or whoever it may be from all these other territories, they would go through Sam to discuss when the champion was coming to their area, and then they would build these storylines around that. But Sam was a very powerful individual back in the day, and very well respected. You talk to any of the boys now that worked back in the day, they'll tell you he was a great payoff guy. If he told you something, it was his word. He never stiffed anybody. And that's kind of what he instilled in Larry and I, that you treat the boys right and they're going to treat you right. And that's why I've been pretty happy with being able to pick up a phone and call a Jerry Briscoe or a Baron von Raschke or Tony Atlas, people like that, and not have to dicker with them. I say, hey, I got an event. When do you need me there? And if they're available, they're coming.
Right. So you're influenced by people like Sam and Larry, and you're taught the business basically through them. How old were you whenever you're like, okay, I am ready to buy or start my own promotion, and the steps that you had to take in order to make this happen?
Oh yeah, well, like I said, Larry and I was both young men, and Larry was 16 years old when he started, and
Wow.
his first job was that was it. I mean, when I was riding over there to the office, he was 16. We didn't have a driver's license. If it wouldn't have been for his father, that would never have happened. And then Larry started writing articles for Larry, and then he started calling in the results. So, here we are 16, 17, 18 years old. And I mean, that dream that he had and I had, is we can see it, it's out there. And then Sam opens the door for us to say, hey, more so for Larry. I mean, Larry was his man underneath his wing. But then Larry, through our friendship, because we had other things in common, we had law enforcement. He was a auxiliary officer. I was a police officer. So we had that common bond. And then, of course, wrestling was the glue that held us together. So we're working out there and just enjoying it. When you walk into the office and there's somebody like Gene Kaniski sitting in there, or Fritz von Erich, and you're going, oh man, I just saw him on TV last week, or a couple weeks ago. Like I said, you're that kid at a candy shop. Of course, Sam always said, keep these open and this closed and you'll go a long way. And that's what I did. Larry was a little bit more voiceful than I was, but over the years. But again, at 73, my first match in Malden, Missouri, had some local guys out of the St. Louis area that was on there. And of course, then you get the fire lit underneath you and you're going, man, this is great. There you go through all the trials and tribulations. And then I'm still green. I'm green as the grass out there. I had some rough goes with Dick the Bruiser. I mean, Victor Bruiser and I went round and round over the territorial issues that he thought I was stepping on his toes, and I remember I made a drive all the way to Indianapolis to meet with him and trying to work it out. And I mean, that's a story that a scary one. But again, in the long run, he ended up leaving this good earth, and I ended up with his TV tapes that I acquired from his wife before she passed away. So I have his library that still on the TV reels, and I'm getting them downloaded slowly but surely. So I'll be having them available soon. Same as I've got the St. Louis library. But again, it's but back then I'm thinking, I heard all the horror stories. If you go into another promoter's territory, look out, you may get your leg broke, or, so that was always up there. But then I got to thinking, if we have to be tough, we're going to be tough. It's something I wanted to do, and I continue to do it. But I learned at an early age, I'm a good negotiator. I can talk to people like the Dick DeBruisers of the world and people like that, and didn't have to come to worry about somebody hitting you in the head or something,
Right. So what was the name of your very first promotion?
Basically, I just started off under my name, Herb Simmons, and eventually I decided I wanted to stay primarily in Illinois, so I formed an LLC. It's called SICW, Southern Illinois Championship Wrestling. Even though I continue to run, I still run in Missouri now. I have a valid Missouri license. Back when I started running, you had to have a license in Illinois, and I was the only resident of the state of Illinois that held a valid promoter's license for a short period of time. And that kind of changed. And then they got rid of the athletic commission as far as professional wrestling when Vince came in and convinced them it was sports entertainment. And so they kind of did away with the athletic part of it. But we used to have an athletic commissioner had to do blood pressure and the pulses, and you had to do that to all the boys. And of course, there was all about money. You had to pay them their 10% of the gate, and so now that's gone. But that was how far back that was. But and then when Vince ran shows at the Prairie Farm State or places like that, I would do his permits for him because he didn't live in the state of Illinois, and but he was the man that got rid of this Illinois Athletic Commission.
Okay, and trust me, we'll get to Vince. It's part of my questions, obviously. So you said you worked in law enforcement. How long did you work in law enforcement for?
I'm sorry?
How long did you work in law enforcement?
Well, I still do kind of now.
Okay.
I'm still a commissioned officer, but I was a police chief for a long time before I became mayor. I worked for the village of Washington Park here in Illinois. I'd been deputized by the United States Marshal Service, what they call an SFO, and worked on a federal drug task force for 5 years. And then I was the chief of East Grondolet, Illinois, and then I got elected mayor, and still the mayor. But I've worked with, got a lot of good friends in law enforcement, and it sure has changed from what it was when we worked the streets back several years back. And I every time I see a law enforcement officer out there, and of course my job now is in charge of the 911 center for the county, and so I still work daily with law enforcement, with our first responders, and I ran an ambulance company for 35 years in East St. Louis, Illinois. So my heart has a special place for all of our first responders.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we need them. That's for sure. So with your, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but with your first promotion, how much did it cost to actually start up a promotion way back when?
A couple of nickels. It didn't take much. I mean, you find the right guys who's doing it, and I'm joking there, but
Right.
I wished it cost now what it cost back then. I'll say that because like everything, it costs, everything's went up. And, the talent that you had back then were guys, it was basically learning how to lace their boots up. And as long as you gave the fans a good show, they really appreciated it. Now I'm sympathetic to the talent out there nowadays because, and I think that's one reason why I try to do what I do now for the boys and the legends, as I call them, because back in the day they had no retirement, no 401ks, no health insurance. So when these guys are out going to these fan fest and these comic cons trying to make money, they're trying to supplement their income because they didn't get to do a lot. They didn't have a lot to invest back then. And so that's why I try to bring them in as much as I can and have these fan fests now and help them make a little money on the side.
Right. And I'm glad you brought this up because this will go very smoothly and to something I want to talk about real quick. We'll get back to your life. Mr. Herb is absolutely right. There was not a whole lot for these guys way back in the day to invest in, but that's why we have a nonprofit organization called the Cauliflower Alley Club, and I am a member of that, guys. And if you are someone who supports and loves professional wrestling, like I do, and you are wanting to be able to do your part to help professional wrestlers, the guys that you grew up watching up and the ladies as well, guess what? You too can join the Cauliflower Alley Club, and it's so cheap. It only will cost you $36 a year. That is 10 cents a day. And this money goes to help all of those legends that weren't making the money like they're making today. So if you guys are interested, just go to caulifloweralleyclub.com and there are different packages. You can even join you can pay up front for a whole year if you want to, or you can do what I'm doing, which is the recurring every year, which is $36. I know Mr. Herb is a big supporter and a member of that as well, correct?
Yeah, and just not to correct you, but it's caulifloweralley.org.
Oh, .org.
.org. And I'm a big supporter. I'm listed on there as the ambassador for the Cauliflower Alley Club on their website, which our president CEO B. Brian Blair, our vice president chairman Rich Engling, Darla Staggs, one of the board members, dear friend of mine from the St. Louis area, but now lives in Florida, based in the sun, as I tell her. But we got a few new board members on there, but it's an organization, and I tell the guys that it's like a supplemental insurance policy, because if you've been involved in the business, ring crew, announcer, wrestler, as long as you've been involved for 3 years or longer and you fall on hard times, that's what we're there for. And I can tell you countless stories, times of people who have fallen on hard times because it happens. Like I said, a lot of the guys that we grew up that entertained us, that traveled the road night after night, miles, hundreds of miles to get from one show to another, away from their families, away from the holidays, the birthdays, just to go out and entertain the public. And then they fall on hard times. But, you fall behind on a car payment or a mortgage, or you have medical bills. Cauliflower Alley, Darla Staggs, like I said, she's the benevolent contact. You go on our website. I think they did increase the membership just by a few dollars, I think. I try not to get involved in that, but you can also become a lifetime member, which like I am. I think that it's one of the greatest organizations out there if you're a fan. And hopefully if the people who are watching us now, they got to be a fan to be watching us, or, somebody else who's really big into the Cauliflower Alley is your good friend and mine, Mr. Cook. He preaches it all the time. And, there's a gentleman out there, if you want to talk wrestling, he's a guy that can talk all night long.
Absolutely. And I tell you, to all of those who are thinking about joining, look, the first thing I did after I joined was I bought me a t-shirt. I love buying different t-shirts. But this is the difference between me buying a t-shirt through the Cauliflower Alley Club and me just going wherever to buy a t-shirt. A lot of times I'm like, do I really need to buy this t-shirt? But let me tell you, that thought did not go across my mind when I purchased my t-shirt from the Cauliflower Alley Club, because I knew that my money was going towards something I love. And those are the superstars and the legends within professional wrestling. And it is such a feel good thing to do, because again, your money is going for something good. So, but Mr. Earl, let's get back to you real quick. So you get involved and you get your own promotion going. Was it because of Larry and Sam that you were able to eat to get wrestlers to come into your promotion and wrestle for you? Did you have a difficult time recruiting these guys? How did that go?
No, I'll be honest with you. It was that part of it was easy because of the connection with Larry and Sam. And once they started introducing me to um, the higher up guys in the bigger promotions, I was working with a young man out of St. Louis. His name was Tony Costa, ring name. Uh, Over at the South Broadway Athletic Club. Him and I became super friends and formed kind of a unofficial partnership. I had his back, he had my back. I attended his shows for 40 years over there, helped him with the TV, did his play-by-play for him. He was my junior heavyweight champion for many, many years. Uh, so we had a lot of local talent there. Uh, but him and I were kind of different. I you got to have the local talent. There's no doubt about it. But I was always the one that was wanting to bring in the bigger guys that were on television or had been on television here locally for two reasons. One, I think it was giving back to them, and then two, giving to the fans, let them get up and personal with them. Because years ago, when they were at the Kiel Auditorium or at the Checker Dome in St. Louis, it was hard to get an autograph from them. It was hard to get a picture from them unless you had an old Polaroid camera that you had to snap, and most of the time it'd be a blurry picture. But so we bring them in and let them get more friendly, more fan friendly. And so that's what I was doing. And then I would help him. I would bring guys over to South Broadway Athletic Club like Baron von Raschke or Harley Race or people like that. And it would help put butts in the seats. And that's why we still do it today. One, to have the fans get to meet these people up in personal. When you have a crowd full of fans sitting there and you bring in somebody like a Tito Santana or Ricky Steamboat, like we've done, the fans enjoy it. And then you give them a good wrestling card. I mean, it's, man, you got your steak and potato and everything all in one night. So, so it wasn't that hard because, I pick up a phone, call Larry and say, hey, can we get Rocky Johnson or can we get Tony Atlas or, can we get Terry Funk? And that went on for a long time. Larry was kind of my go-to guy that was making these contacts. And then finally, one time he was like, here's the phone number. Okay, what am I supposed to do with that? Call him. No, man, they ain't gonna know me from Adam. Well, yeah, they know you. And one of the real quick story while we're talking about that, one of the guys that I was just scared to death, worried about to ever have to make a deal with was Abdullah the Butcher, because all these horror stories about Abby. He wouldn't show, he wouldn't do this. And it was actually at that time Bruiser Broody, who turned out to be another one of my best friends. He's the one that gave me the 411 on dealing with Abby. And he had made a couple of the arrangements, and then about the third or fourth time we were doing the shows, and he said, "You call him and make the deal." I said, "No." He said, "No, you got to." And I'll never forget. And Abby and I talk about it to this day. But because when I called him, it was like, "No, I want this, I want that." And Frank had told me what he was going to do, how he was going to play his angle, like playing chess or checkers, And I played it, and I finally said, "Okay, well, I that's not in my budget." And I said, "I'll let Frank know." And he said, "Frank who?" And I said, "Brody." And he said, "Oh, Brody's going to be on this card too?" I said, "Yeah, I had you and him going against it." He says, "What's the date?" And so that's how Abby and I became friends, and that's why he was at last year's Fan Fest, and he's coming back this year. So, but yeah, you learn how to negotiate with these guys. And it was all because of what Larry and Sam, and then people like Brody. Brody opened up a lot of doors with Dick Murdoch, Crusher Blackwell, Greg Valentine for me. So yeah, I owe a huge debt to those three men.
So, and we're going to fast forward here in a second. I know you said that you're still kind of working in law enforcement in your position as a mayor and things like that, but imagine that you went from being full-time to cutting back in law enforcement because of the success of your promotion. How long were you in business before that actually happened?
As far as being in law enforcement?
No, as far as not being full-time in law enforcement and you just concentrating on your promotion, or have you always stayed full-time law enforcement?
No. I never was full-time. I was always part-time. Yeah, I
Okay.
was always part-time in the law enforcement side of it because, as I told you, I ran an ambulance company for 35 years in East St. Louis. And at that time, I was doing my wrestling promotions, and it may be one match, one show a month, or maybe two. 95% of what we do with the wrestling, we do for nonprofit organizations. For police departments, for fire departments. I've got one coming up the end of March for the Ionide Shriners Temple in East St. Louis, Illinois. Ironically, 3 blocks from where I told you I grew up at in the housing projects is where this beautiful temple is. And this is our 4th year that we'll be there helping them raise funds. We've helped people who has been injured, got hurt. We had a fire chief that got diagnosed with cancer, has passed away now, but we raised him $40,000 at a wrestling card. Wow. So, we do school fundraisers. We've got several of them booked for this year again already. And so a lot of our organizations is year after year that we go and help. So it's not like we're out knocking on some organization's door and saying, "Hey, we'll come and help you." It's right. They call us, and I think that's I credit that to the boys that come out and put on a great show. Our fans are well into what we're doing. They share everything on social media. They take pictures, and they talk about those 4 letters SICW all the time. As far as being old school, it's and that's what we do. We keep the old school mentality of wrestling.
Right. So let's fast forward a little bit. I know that you were successful enough in St. Louis that you ended up getting it was a lifetime award, correct? Your award, the award.
Yeah, they awarded me with the Lifetime Achievement Award at our Fan Fest, which totally just blew my mind. I had no idea they were doing it. Jimmy Hart, the Mouth of the South, was actually part of that surprise. I don't do any of this for awards. I mean, I've been put in a couple of different other Hall of Fames in the St. Louis area, and I appreciate it. I'm honored, but I don't do it for that. I do it, one, I enjoy the business. As I said, from being that young kid growing up and seeing it on television for the first time and, watching Dick the Bruiser jump off with the atomic drop. or Farmer Marlin doing his mule kick. I've been a fan, and so I don't do it for the awards. But again, I truly am honored when I get an award like that. I mean, a couple of years ago at the Cauliflower Alley Club, I received the Red Bastien Award. And Red Bastien was one of my favorite wrestlers when he came to St. Louis, so that was kind of ironic that happened. And he was one of my mom's favorites. So, but they gave me the Lifetime Achievement Award, and like I said, and of course, then the following year, I kind of turned around and pulled the surprise on Jimmy Hart, and we gave him the award. And a guy like Jimmy Hart, you never think could be speechless, but that night he was, and so it was pretty neat to do that. This year, we're giving it to Teddy Long. Teddy Long will receive the Lifetime Achievement Award. So guys out there need to be recognized, and guys like Teddy Long started off sweeping the floors at the wrestling matches and putting up chairs. Jimmy Hart's 81 years old, and he's still out there helping put up chairs when he comes to town.
Yeah, so, I think the first time I was introduced to Teddy Long was when I was watching Atlantic Championship Wrestling. I grew up watching Mid-South. I'm originally from Louisiana. But Teddy was a referee when I first seen him. But you mentioned Fan Fest, which you have happening here in a month or so, isn't it? It's in May, isn't it?
Yeah, May 16th and 17th.
Yeah, tell people about it, and tell who's going to be there.
Well, it's this is my third year of doing it, and it's I think I'm crazy, and I've been told I am by some of the boys. But they have these Fan Fest and these type of events all over the country, but they hadn't had one in St. Louis. The closest they had was back in 2012. Farmer wrestler, Colonel Buck Robley, had reached out to Larry Matasek and I and said, hey, I got a guy that wants to put on a show. He's a big Road Warrior fan, and we're going to do it in St. Charles at the convention center. We need some local guys to help promote it, and we can't think of anybody better than you and Larry. So we met with him. The gentleman flew in town. We made a deal. He had like 22 of the legends. He had everybody. Snuka, the Funks were there. Tommy Rich, of course, John Laurinaitis, people like that. Kamala, the Ugandan giant. So that was probably the closest to any type of fan fest. Well, lo and behold, I did my first one 3 years ago. And we had probably 20, 25 legends in there. The second year we end up with 60 legends. And that was a logistic nightmare because 60 people flying in, 60 people got to fly out, and they all can't get on the same plane. They're all coming from different parts of the country. So we made 60 trips from the airport to the hotel on Friday and then Sunday back. Great time. Everybody enjoyed it. We had vendors come from all over that sold their T-shirts and whatever they may be. This year, I've moved it to the Hilton at the St. Louis airport. Nicer venue, smart move because I just saw last week the place that I had at for the last 2 years. That hotel just closed down. So if I'd have made the deal there, we'd have been no building. So, but it's going to be on May 16th, that Friday night. I'm sure you know the name Bill Apter. Bill, good dear friend. We put Bill in the St. Louis Wrestling Hall of Fame. Larry Matasek and I and my senior referee, Nick Rednar, started the St. Louis Wrestling Hall of Fame many years ago. And we put Bill Apter in there, one of the first Hall of Fames he ever got into. And he probably should be in every one that's anywhere around, because back in the day, they didn't have what you and I are sitting here doing tonight. They didn't have social media. They didn't have all the fancy cameras, but he traveled all over the country, all over the world with these wrestlers, taking the photographs and making sure they got into magazines. So when guys like us ran down to the local drugstore or to the grocery store waiting for that magazine, you go through there, Bill Apter's name was under probably 95% of those photos taken. So he helped make a lot of these guys' careers by doing the photograph and the stories. So, but Bill will be there on May 16th, that Friday night, and he's going to host a question and answer session with the boys that will come in and the girls that Friday afternoon. It'll start about 7 o'clock that evening, and then the guys will have their table set up. And if the fans want to get their autographs or purchase items, they'll be able to Friday night. This year, we hadn't done that the last 2 years, but it was Teddy Long that said, "Hey, we're doing that Friday night. Why don't we set the tables up?" I said, "They're going to be set up anyway, so why not?"
Right.
And then Saturday on the 17th at about 10 o'clock in the morning or whatever time I want to open the doors, it won't be later than 10. If there's a lot of people there at 9, I'm letting them in because I don't like letting people stand outside. And so they'll come in but we've got Dr. D. David Schultz is going to be there. The Rock and Roll Express, Kevin Von Erich is going to be there. Gangrel. The list, Cowboy Bob Orton Jr. Right now I think we're up to about 27, 28 guys. Buff Bagwell, it's the who's who of professional wrestling. And there's still people that's calling it I'm negotiating with. I'm using my Larry Matisek and Sam Muchnick and Bruiser Broody skills with. But and again, I don't say negotiate. It's just that they're scheduling. Just this week, Bill Alfonso, I just added him. Great guy. Shane Douglas is going to be there. Sabu. So it's going to be a little bit for everybody. And so that will run all day on Saturday until about 5 o'clock. And then we'll do the St. Louis Wrestling Hall of Fame induction. This year, we've got the class of 2025 going in. Greg Valentine will be there with us. He's being inducted. We're inducting Crusher Blackwell. He's not with us anymore, but very well deserving former Missouri state champion. We're inducting Ivan Koloff. And Nikita Koloff will be with us. He'll be there and accepting the award on Ivan's behalf. And Ox Baker will be there. And then he won't be there, I'm sorry, but he'll be inducted. His daughter is going to be there. And then the fifth one is Hacksaw Butch Reed, and his family is coming in. So we got a great class of 2025 going in to the St. Louis Wrestling Hall of Fame. And so that takes place at 5 o'clock. We'll have a little video package put together for each of them. And then it's around 7-ish. The Bruiser Broody Memorial will kick off. And that is an SICW wrestling card that will have a lot of surprises. And of course, the finale is the Bruiser Broody Battle Royal. Bruiser Brody's widow, Barbara Goodish, comes each year and awards the winner a big trophy cup, and they get to tout that around with them for the year. So it's a great weekend, and it's real economical. You go to SICW.org. There's a packages on there. If you want to come just to the Bill Apter question and answer session, you can. If you want a bundle package, if you want to come just to the Fan Fest and not the wrestling, why you wouldn't want to do the whole thing? Because, I mean, the whole bundle package is, I think, right at $100. And if you want a premium seat for the wrestling, it's an extra $15. And it's the 2 first rows around the ring. But it's going to be great. Got a lot of surprises going on. And you never know who's going to show up that maybe hasn't been advertised. I mean, last year, we inducted Cowboy Bob Orton Jr. and his son, Randy Orton, appeared and inducted him with his family members. So it's always a surprise at SICW.
Yeah, and you brought up Ace Cowboy Bob Orton, absolute legend. I grew up watching him with always the cast. Now, and you mentioned SICW, which you're the owner. How did you get partnered with Cowboy Bob Orton as far as the wrestling school and using the talent there?
Uh, Bob's worked for me forever. Great friends. Have made a lot of road trips with Bob. I helped book him around the country. And I made a lot of those trips with him. And so I spent a lot of time in the car. Uh, One of the greatest, well respected by the boys, reputation of being one of the toughest in the business. And so we not only have a business relationship, but it's a friendship. And so when I came up back when Larry Matisek was still with us, we started a school one time. Didn't take off real well because not everybody wants to go out there and get
Mhm.
in the wrestling business.
Right.
So we started one and it didn't go. So then a little while later, we talked with Bob and said, "Hey, what if we, you're getting older, like I am. We need to start training some of the next generations." And Bob's kind of like, yeah, whatever you want to do. And so we kind of just said, okay, we're going to start it and put it underneath the SICW, and it's the Ace Wrestling Academy. And Bob, it's kind of on a sabbatical right now because they're looking for a different building.
Mhm.
But we've got some young men that's graduated from it. Uh, Strictly Business, Brandon Beretta. He's going by now. He's doing work for OVW, for NWA,
Mhm.
EC3's had him up there with them. Joey Vanetti, they were part of what was called the group Top Gun up until a month or two ago, and of course they've split up now. They're arch enemies,
Right.
You know how that goes.
Yep.
And in fact, they'll be going against one another on April 5th. They will return to the Belle Claire Fairgrounds in Belleville, Illinois. But we've had several young men and women. We got Lilith Khan, the spawn of Telecon, his daughter, 6'5", 6'6". Uh, I mean, picture China. If you remember China,
Mhm.
Lilith Khan is right there, and she graduated with honors. And I don't know if I'd want to tangle with her. So, but so yeah, the Ace, the Wrestling Academy, and Bob enjoys it. It keeps him occupied when he's not out on the road signing autographs and or in the gym working out. And so that's how we got tied up, just out of friendship. I was part of giving his son Randy his first match on the independent market over 30 years ago at South
Wow.
Broadway Athletic Club. And I've always joked with Randy and said, well, when you decide to retire from, where you're at now, you owe me a autograph signature type thing. And well, he came last year and, not too many promoters that I can think of that can say they had Randy Orton inside their independent wrestling ring.
Right.
I mean, I got calls from promoters from around the country. How did you pull that off? I said, "Hey, that's it. That's his dad. He's going to come and help induct his dad into the Hall of Fame."
Yeah, before it's over with, Randy is going to be also inducted into a Hall of Fame, and if not multiple. He is just absolutely incredible. Matter of fact, uh, it seems like the older he gets, the better he looks. And he is just so damn good. He
Well,
really is.
and it made sense. Bob had done so much for the business, and in St. Louis, and in his career everywhere else he was. So, and his father was inducted into the St. Louis Hall of
Mhm.
Fame, and his father was on the first wrestling card of Wrestling at the Chase back in
Oh,
1959.
wow.
So I told
Wow.
Randy, I said, when you retire and you get ready, I'm going to induct you into the St. Louis Hall of Fame because then I'll have all three of you in there.
Right. Right. So let's talk about a very, very sad topic. And you mentioned, I know he was a very good friend of yours, Bruiser Brody. Um, he passed away. Well, he was murdered in 1988 in Puerto Rico. And there's just so much behind that. Some believe that if they would have actually paused or at least stopped the show and they had attended to his injuries with his stabbed, he could still be alive. Of course, the excuse is, the fans would have rioted. That blows my mind. Um, I don't think Gonzalez was ever prosecuted, not that I'm aware of. Tell me about this. What do you know about this story, if you don't mind talking about it?
Well, I mean, I won't talk a lot about what I know the cause of it. I've told other people it's asked that I'm in the process of writing a book after being told by Larry Matisek that I should write a book, not only on the wrestling, but on my life. But I said, well, other than my wife, I don't know who would read it or buy it or whatever. But so here, about a year ago, I just started putting some pen to paper and got a gentleman helping me with it. And I've said that what my knowledge of that behind the cause, uh, which Larry and I and Frank Bruiser Broody had hours and hours of discussion about the business and what our plans were. Him and I, it was, and Barbara Goodish kind of let that out of the bag on a podcast that she was doing. That Frank and I was in the early, I mean, in the late stages of doing a business arrangement, and so we had in-depth conversations. In fact, back in 1988, the weekend before he was brutally murdered, he was with Larry and I at my restaurant and lounge in Cahokia, Illinois, doing my 1 year anniversary there. So he spent the whole weekend with us that weekend before, and then 7 days later is when we got that terrible call. Um, I actually got out of the business for about a year after that. I mean, I stayed in touch with some boys, but I didn't promote any shows. I just felt like my heart had been ripped out, and not because of the possibility of him and I doing some extra business together and Larry. It was just that I was so distraught to the fact that how something like that can happen. Um, yeah, and I've talked to the Dutch Mantels of the world. I've talked to the Tony Atlases of the world multiple occasions of Tony and I. Um, Terrible time, but you got to keep in mind wrestling in Puerto Rico totally different than what
Mhm.
it is anywhere else. For the show to continue on, um, you know, yeah, we could sit here and say that could have made a difference, may have, but I sure wish they would have tried at least, because then otherwise he'd have still been here in 2025 helping Herb Simmons run wrestling shows. I know he would. I wouldn't have a doubt about that. That's one of the reasons why I have continued his name every year with the Bruiser Brody Memorial. I post every picture I got in my collection that I can. There's those weekends that I'm sitting around thinking, and I'll get my photo albums out and I'll post a bunch of pictures because it's kind of my escape from reality, as you say. But he meant so much to me for the business and for the fans. I mean, there are people out there today that weren't even born when he was murdered and didn't know his career. That thanks to YouTube and other social media, say, man, that guy was a giant. Man, he was a wild man. I mean, they're going out and getting tattoos on their bodies, and we, Barbara and I, go to some of these conventions, whether it be in Vegas or up to the Tragus Says Hall of Fame, where we'll be going back to in July. People coming up and just talking to her about how much they love Bruiser Brody, and she'll say, "Well, you weren't even born." No, but we've read about him, and her and Larry wrote the book, and so terrible times. But and you're right. There's all the stories. Oh, it was over drugs. It was over money. It was over this and that. But I can tell you, um, uh, it was a uh, situation where he Frank was not going to be bullied on any given day. And I've played this over in my mind a million times now. The Frank I know got caught off guard, and they knew they had to do that because one-on-one,
Mhm.
he'd have ate him alive and anybody else in there. And then he'd have had guys that would have been there to help him, like the Tony Atlases of the world, if it got too bad. But, you know, when you sucker punch somebody with a knife and you don't see it coming, um, so it was, I can tell you, it was premeditated. Don't care what anybody says. And then to have that piece of shit, I'm sorry for my language,
You're good.
to get by with what he did is just uncalled for. I mean, I remember after that out in Las Vegas when his good friend Terry Funk and Stan Hansen, they were honoring Bruiser Broody, and Barbara and I and other friends were sitting there, and I can still hear Stan Hansen, who was Brody's good friend, and of course Terry Funk, and Terry said, I've never been back, and I'm never going back. A lot of guys haven't been back, but it's just it was sad. It's still a sad day, and that's why I tell Barbara that I will continue to keep his legacy alive as long as she allows me to do so.
Right. And we're gonna leave that sad part alone because I respect your feelings and all the stuff that comes with it. But I don't want to leave or close this part about Bruiser Broody. I'm sorry, Rosie Brody. On a sad note, I know you guys are good friends. Tell me your favorite story about him that puts a smile on your face.
Oh my gosh! I mean, so many. I told you we had the place in Cahokia, Illinois, that he would come to, and I set up the upstairs of it, and we called it the Brody Lounge. And it was a place that when he was coming through the area, if he had a layover or something traveling, he knew he could come there and he could relax. And amongst our circle of friends locally, we could sit and talk business or whatever it may be. But, the man was very intelligent. The the Bruiser Brody, or depending on what area he was in, the King Kong Brody, uh, was different outside the ring. Um, he had a degree in journalism, loved the stock market. Uh, you know, uh, I guess my what I really loved about him was is that back then I weighed close to 500 pounds,
Mhm.
uh, and he would every show that I had him booked on. Let me say the funniest one. The funniest one is my first show that I had him booked on. And remember, there were all these stories about, man, you can't trust Brody. He'll stand you up. He'll do this. He'll do that. Uh, when I was going to book him at the Belle Claire Fairgrounds, and this would have been back the late 70s, early 80s. Um, Larry Matisek made the arrangements. I was running shows on a Thursday night there, once or twice a month, and I had guys from I had Tojo Yamamoto, Gypsy Joe, Frank Morrell, Bill Ash's guys, Saul Rhinecroft's son George, people like that were coming up working for me, and and we were drawing good houses. And Larry was standing there behind a petition one night, and he says, "Hey, what would you think about uh, me getting Brody to come in here?" And I remember I turned around and looked at him. Brody's not coming to Belleville, Illinois. This guy's larger than life. Why would he come to Belleville, Illinois? He said, "Oh, let me check into it." That following week, I mean, he's calling me and he said, "Hey, come up to the house. We got to call Frank. He's interested." So we go up there, get him on the phone with us, and lo and behold, Larry had greased the wheels for me. And so we make the deal. And man, I got newspaper ads. I got posters out, King Kong Brody's coming to the Belclair Fairgrounds. And it's kind of like, it's a buzz, everybody wants to see King Kong Broody. The night of the at the Belclair Fairgrounds, where I still run shows this month. Every month we're there. It's a big open building. It's a fairgrounds, big metal building. And in my mind, I'm thinking of all the horror stories that I've been told about. He stood the Bruiser up. He stood this guy up. He did this. He did that. And so, back then we were starting the shows at 8:00. It gets to be about 7:30, and we're packed. We're packed to the rafters, and everybody's there. They're not there to see me. They're not there to see the undercard. They want to see Bruiser Broody, King Kong Broody. And so I'm standing outside this building. There's the length of the whole building. There's like a carport. And I bet I walked that thing 3-4 times. It's 7:30. I'm looking at my watch. It's 7:45. And I can hear the people in there. Broody, Broody. I'm thinking, holy crap, My wife, who I'm still married to today after 49 years, I think. If she watches this, if I'm wrong, she'll let me know. 49 years anyway. She comes out, babe, what are we going to do? I said, what do you mean? She said, did you hear him in there? I said, yeah. She says, what are we going to do? I said, what are we going to do? What are you going to do? I'm getting in the car and leaving. And no, you can't do it. And a couple of the guys come outside and said, man, boss, what are we doing? And I'm trying to call Larry. Can't get an answer. Back then we had the old bag cell phones. They don't have these little things now the size of a camera. And so I'm standing there. And as we're talking, it's about 5 minutes to 8. And I look at the driveway that comes in the gates because it's all fenced in. And the parking lot's full, but I can see down the road. I said, wait a minute. It looks like Larry's car. And he pulls in the gate. And the closer it gets towards me, I see that's him. And I had a reserved parking spot for him. I moved the cone on one of those orange cones out of the way. Mm-hmm. He pulls in there, and the passenger door opens up, and this guy just unfolds out of it. He's got a pair of cutoff shorts on, got his tennis shoes on, and he's putting his hair back up in the ponytail, tightening it down like he always did. And he walked over there to me, and he stuck his hand out, and I grabbed his hand. And, back then there was kind of a handshake we used. Bob may have told you, we called it the secret handshake, basically. And he said, big boy, I bet you thought I wasn't coming. And I looked up at him and I said, nah, I wasn't worried about nothing. Come on, let's go inside. I was sweating bullets because I'd heard all. And so, the night goes on. Afterwards, we're sitting in the locker room having a few cold drinks, and he's laughing his tail off, and then he starts telling me what happened to the Bruiser, why he knocked the Bruiser out, had a fight with him because it was all over money. Mm-hmm. Promoters tell him one thing, and he gets there. Oh, the house is bad. We'll catch you next time. Another story at the Fairmount Park racetrack. I had him and Ox Baker going against one another, and they dressed in the tack room where the jockeys dressed at, and it's tight. It's small quarters, and we was out on the front of the grandstands on a Sunday afternoon. So they get out there. They're doing their wild thing. He throws Ox out of the ring. I'm standing there, and I always wear a tie because everybody says, Herb sleeps in a tie, or Herb eats breakfast with a tie on. And well, Sam always said, you're a professional. You got to play the part. And so I'm standing there at the ring post, and Ox Baker just hauls off, and he grabs me by the tie, and he hauls off and clobbers me because he always taped his arms all the way up, because he was going to deliver that heart punch. And man, he rings my bell, and I'm stumbling. And now they're wrestling all the way back to the tack room while I'm stumbling all the way back there. And I never forget, I walk inside the door and I hear Ox over there, and he's just laughing his tail off. He said, I don't know who it was. He said, but there's somebody out there got a headache. He said, I hauled off and just gave him a big one. He was right there at ringside. And Brody and Larry is sitting there, and they start laughing. They said, well, you dumbass. Said, that was the promoter, Herb. And Ox was, legally blind almost, He said, oh, my God, Mr. Herb. He said, I'm sorry. And Brody's just sitting over there when he used to drink those little pony beers, and he's opening them and just drinking them. He had his beer opener, and he can drink them faster than you can blink your eye. And as Ox was begging me for forgiveness, Frank's going, no, take it out of his pay. So, just stuff like that,
Right.
But, but he was a guy that man, if he loved you or liked you, it was there.
Yeah. So how are we doing on time? Are you okay if a couple more questions?
Sure. I'm no time. I'm your time. I've cleared my schedule.
Perfect. So let's talk. You brought up him earlier. Let's talk Vince McMahon. So there are some people who believe that when Vince kind of took all the territories, that the territories were kind of dying. So really, Vince saved professional wrestling. What is your take on this? Do you think that Vince kind of broke that law that should be broken in professional wrestling, or did he save professional wrestling?
What he saved was what he saved to make money, and I can't fault him for that. Everything the guy touches turns into gold. It's the way he went about doing it is what's terrible. There were promoters out there that were in debt trying to keep their promotions going. There was workers out there. He ruined a lot of people's lives, even though he's helped some of them. I use St. Louis as an example. I always thought, Vince said because he was different than his father from what I know. His father, Senior, was part of the NWA at one time. Him and Sam Muchnick were good friends. And of course, when Vince Jr. come around, once he got his oats and, he made the statement that he was either going to own and control everything or turn it into a circus. Well, we had Doink the Clown, we had Insane Posse, and some of these other characters that you would see at a circus. So he done both. He ended up controlling everything, and he ended up doing what he wanted to do. Did he save professional wrestling? Yeah, because there were promotions that were dying. But I just think that he could have went about it a different way. He came into St. Louis, bought the television out from underneath Larry Matisek. He ended up giving Larry a job for 10 years. Larry hated every stroke of the clock. Larry hated working for Vince. I have a transcript of the next book that Larry was writing. And it was going to be the difference between Sam Muchnick and Vince McMahon. And someday I will finish the last chapter because I know what that was going to be about. And I told Larry, it's going to be hard for you to write a book like that because your life from the time you were 16 years old until the day Sam Muchnick died, you were like an adopted son to him. And then you worked for the guy who came in and took away either most of the time forcibly to these territories, bought them out, gave them pennies on a dollar, or bought the TVs out from underneath them and forced them out. And you worked for him for 10 years. So to write a book about the difference between them two men, I don't know if you can be fair about it. But when you read, like I've read the transcript now that he was writing about 3 times. he did a damn good job, I think. And I think the reason why he did, because he knew that I was going to read it and his wife was going to proofread it. She is a retired school teacher, English teacher, and she did all of his punctuations and everything and corrected all of that for him. But she would have told him the right thing too. You got to be fair, because the public's going to want you to be fair. It can't be a one-sided story. But he did. So he told the story. But whether you like Vince or you don't like Vince, professional wrestling was going to go down had he had not stepped up and did what he did. I believe that. I just believe that. But could you imagine of him being a Sam Muchnick with Sam Muchnick's mentality? And Sam's idea was, and I heard him explain it several times, it was like you had a pie, and we're all going to share that pie equally. And if there's X amount of promotions that are in this, eating this pie, here's your sliver, everybody's sliver. And then if there's some left over here, we're going to share that equally also. So there was nobody that was getting more than anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
If Vince, with his mentality, could have had the mentality of a Sam Muchnick, man, sky would have been the limit.
Yeah, I agree.
That's my own opinion, and I know there's some people out there that may disagree with me, but I'm speaking on it from conversations that I've had with some of the boys and what I saw myself. I mean, what I saw, how he did Larry Matisek come in and just bought the TV out from underneath him. And, Larry tried his own promotion for about 16 months. And when he lost the TV, why keep spinning your wheels, and then he did offer him a job. He got a paycheck from him every month for 10 years. But it was most 10 miserable years that Larry had.
Yeah, Vince, I remember when I was first introduced to WWF wrestling, because again, I grew up watching Mid-South Wrestling. It was on Channel 26 in Louisiana. It was before we had cable. And I remember when we got cable and my brother said, hey, check out WWF. When I did, it was terrible. Not that what he was doing or their wrestling was bad. It's that growing up watching Mid-South was really reality-based TV. Real guys use it, and, when I seen it, it was, even as a kid, I'm like, this is too cartoonish. It just wasn't my thing. Now, for that territory, that was great for the people who grew up watching that. So when I grew up watching Mid-South, not so much. And I remember I was actually watching when it's called Black Saturday, I believe, when Vince McMahon showed up and on TBS. And I think maybe it was supposed to be Atlantic Championship Wrestling. I'm not too sure about that. I was so young. But I remember thinking, why? Like, I just couldn't get it because I didn't want to see. Right, because as a kid, I didn't want to see cartoon wrestling. I wanted to see my real stuff. But, I started watching WWF back in the 90s during the wrestling, the Monday Night Wars, and I came to like, because, I mean, they were so talented, the guys in the ring. And here we are years later, and I'm still watching WWE, but I also watch AEW. I watch NWA. I watch TNT. I watch your product on Sundays, which is where I'm going at right now. We talked about SICW. Tell people where they can watch SICW wrestling.
Well, the SICW is on every Sunday night on YouTube. We have our YouTube channel like a lot of other people do. And, we're having fun with it. I'm a realist, and I'm smart enough to know that people from the United Kingdom or people from Texas or wherever it may be is not going to jump on an airplane and fly into Belleville, Illinois, and watch an SICW show. Even though I have had my good friend Darla Staggs come in from Florida, or Barbara Goodish, or Pam Morse and J.J. Dillon's daughter come in from their estates. But what we do with our little TV is, if the people have watched it, it's a small studio audience, like back in the day. It's given exposure to my young talent out there. Like I said, I talked about Brandon Beretta earlier, who now is out traveling, and it was because he was seen on our program, and people watched him. They enjoyed him developing the Top Guns that they were in. Attila Khan, who was trained by the late great Harley Race. Um, you know, it's a way to get exposure for them. I'm happy and honored to say that we've been chosen this year to be at the Tragus Thez Hall of Fame reunion. I go there every year in July at the Hall of Fame Museum up there, and we're going to be putting the wrestling event on this year. My good friend Troy Peterson from Impact Wrestling has been doing that for 15 years, and Troy has kind of taken a little break. And so another good friend of mine, Jerry Briscoe, and Chad Olson, who's the event coordinator up there, I asked if SICW would be interested. And, but people from Waterloo, Iowa can expect to see those type of guys that were trained by Harley Race. I got the Night Train Gary Jackson, who got the nickname Night Train from Bruiser Broody. Who goes out there and gives it his all in all. Superstar Steve Fender, trained by Harley Race. People like that are in the SICW locker room. And I think that's why we stand out there. I think that's why we get invited back to these communities year after year, because we bring them the best that there is. And we're going to, when the people leave there, if they're not a fan, they're going to be a fan. And if they're not a believer, some of my guys will make them be believers. Like Johnny Valentine used to say, I might not be able to make you believe wrestling is real, but I can sure as hell make you think I'm real. And he always did do that, So, so yeah, we're on every Sunday night. We tape, like our next show in Belleville, Illinois is April 5th. And then I hold the boys over on Sunday. We tape 4 one-hour programs, and then we show them the next 4 weeks over our TV channel. And then we're on a little TV channel out of St. Louis called Intrigue, Paranormal Intrigue TV. And so they air it on there. And it's nothing fancy. I guarantee you there's no bombs going off other than what you see when the guys get out of a ring and do a little thing. But for the most part of it, it's good storyline wrestling. Last year we did a storyline that lasted 10 months and ended up in a 6-man tag match with Haku, the Barbarian, and Attila Khan against 3 of my All-American team of SICW, Ron Powers, a guy who traveled the world with Brody and Blackwell and people like that, and Luke Williams, and then Danny Boy, and then Gary Night Train Jackson. But that was a 10-month story that the fans followed. You know what it takes to keep fans intrigued for a 10-month feud. You got to keep them entertained. And I've got, and every promoter, I don't care where you go, every promoter, every promotion, oh, we got the greatest. And I do the same thing. But I believe it right here at SICW, we are wrestling fans because we're here in the Midwest where wrestling was wrestling. Anybody out there, whether it's Ric Flair, Ted DiBiase, Dory Funk Jr., you ask any of them and they'll tell you St. Louis was the hub of professional wrestling because of wrestling at the Chase in San Muchnick. The Chase was the place. Yeah. And I was so lucky last year to go back to the wrestling at the Chase, the original room, what was called the Coruscant room. And we were able to put a show on in there. It was my bucket list. The only regret I have is that Larry wasn't there with me because we always wanted to do one there. And, but we could never pull it off. But a year ago, we were invited there to do it. And man, to be in there, the chandeliers are still there. Was no, these guys ever performed in Madison Square Garden couldn't compare to the Corsane Room. And they'll
Yeah,
all
and yeah, and I know we lost Larry about 4 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. But I tell you that I guarantee you that he has a big old smile on his face, but he sees the things that you're still doing. I was fortunate in the fact of I grew up in Louisiana, which produced a lot of great wrestlers, and then 22 years ago I moved to Minnesota, the Midwest, St. Louis, great wrestlers as well. Um, and when it comes to SICW, look, guys, if you just love pure professional wrestling, you need to check this show out. When I met Mr. Herb, he told me I could check him out, and I am a fan now. It is just good, pure wrestling. But you put wrestling in front of me, and I can watch it. I'm going to watch it. I have one last question for you, though. I know at one time you guys did shows for the Shriners organization. Do you guys still do that?
which one? I'm sorry.
The Shriners organization.
Yeah, the Shriners. Yeah, we're actually doing it March 29th. This will be our 4th year. Shriners is another great organization that do they do so much great for the community, and they 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 they're there to help these young kids and these families. And so we go down and we help them. And like I said, they got such a beautiful temple building there, theater seating in it. It's probably the closest thing to the Kiel Auditorium that you ever want to see. And we'll be there on Saturday, March the 29th. They open the doors at 5 o'clock and we'll start at 6 o'clock. We got a great ladies match already lined up for that, and Lilith Khan, who I was talking about, going to take on Kelsey Magnolia. They were in a big feud last year while we were there, and it's continued all over, and it will be there this year. So the Shriners is a great organization, and I'm proud that they picked SICW to help them out. But the one thing I get asked, Kev, is do I have any regrets? And after all of these years, and as I told you, it's been it's had its ups and downs, but boy, I'll tell you that there's been more ups than downs. And I'll never forget Gene Kaniski. I know you've heard that name, Big Thunder. When he was really ill and his time was coming, and he knew it. Larry and him would talk frequently on the phone. We would call and check on him. I would stop by Larry's house on talking business and hey, let's give Thunder a call. And that was a question that Larry had asked him while I was sitting there one day. And he put him on the speakerphone, and he had that, at that time, a little raspy voice, and you could tell he was wearing down. And he told Larry, he said, he said, I've done it all. I've been everywhere. And he said, there's only one regret. And Larry said, what's that? He said, I can't go back and do it all over again. And I'm telling you, if that's the only regret I've got, I'm telling you, it's just, meeting you, talking to you, Bob Cook, people like that. You go to Cauliflower Alley, you never know who you're going to be sitting next with or talking to. And before you know it, your friends, your friends on Facebook Messenger, you're calling one another, you're talking the business. Back in the day, there was wrestling every day. It wasn't seasonal. It wasn't the baseball, the football, the hockey type thing. Guys were wrestling maybe in this town in Chicago, and then turning around and wrestling maybe 100 miles away. And so they had to. And they weren't flying. Well, people like Harley Race was flying, in his car. But there's so many of those stories out there. It's unbelievable. But no, I have no regrets as far as the business. I mean, I can't think of one thing that I would go back and say, I didn't do that right. Let me do it over.
Well, I tell you, Mr. Herb, thank you not only for coming on to the show, but for everything you've done within professional wrestling. You are a legend, and you will be remembered as a legendary promoter. You can shake your head.
No.
You're going to be known because of everything that you've done for professional wrestling, everything you've done for your community, the money that you've raised for different organizations. And speaking of raising money for an organization, I need to talk about this real quick, guys. On March 26th, um, there is Dylan's Austin Awareness Annual Fundraiser that is happening in Navarre, Ohio. It is a show that is raising money for autism. This is a fantastic event that is taking place. Mike Knox is going to be there. Trevor Murdoch's going to be there. There's going to be titles on the line. If you are in Ohio or you're traveling to Ohio, please check this event out. You can feel good about buying tickets to go to this event because, again, it's helping people with autism. Baby Doll's going to be there. Scotty Riggs, who has an amazing story, is going to be there as well. And yours truly is going to be there. I'm not a legend by any means, so it's not a meet and greet with me. But hey, if you see this ugly mug and a beautiful woman, my wife, come say hi to us. I would love to meet people. Mr. Herb, again, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it. You are welcome on my podcast anytime because I tell you, there's so much that we could talk about within your career of professional wrestling. I really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate the invite, and thank you for all you do, helping keep the business alive. You out there allowing people like myself to come on and tell a story. The fans love to hear. I think it's just a way we keep those memories and the legacy of our business alive. So, thank you, and keep up the good work.
Thank you so much, guys. I will be back on tomorrow with the cooker, Bob Cook, to do a recap of Monday Night Raw. I will tell Bob you said hello. Now, Herb, I know Bob Cook, and he's going to say, that was a good interview, but he didn't really talk about me too much. Guarantee you that's going to come out of his mouth.
I did talk about him. Yeah. I hope you guys will do a recap and he'll eat me alive. I know he will.
Anyway, thank you so much again, guys. I will see you all tomorrow. You guys have a great night.
Good night.